Okay, so little shocker here for everybody. Little Shockington. This is in Mediaite. Midterm shock. Democrats take lead over Republicans in major polling average for the first time this year. So every now and then, we had covered a story recently about, wow, Democrats are up when they had previously been getting walloped in the polls. I'm talking about down 6 points, 8 points. But those polls to this point, the ones with Democrats up, were just outliers. So it was like, okay, is this statistical noise or is this indicative of a real trend? Well, we have our answer. It is now a real trend. So let me give you some of the specifics here. After months of trailing in the polls, Democrats have taken the lead over Republicans in the influential 538 generic congressional polling average, the first time they've led since last November. President Joe Biden was riding high for the first few months of his presidency. By the way, that's when he was cutting checks to people. What was it, a $1,400 check, I believe it was? He sent people a $1,400 check, and what do you know? People like him. It's almost like when you materially deliver for the voters, they respond positively. But Biden's approval crossed below 50% for the first time almost a year ago amid the Delta coronavirus surge, the Afghanistan withdrawal, and the beginnings of stubborn inflation. And that approval has yet to recover. So let me pause there and say, it actually has started to bounce back a little bit. He bottomed out at 33%. And I reported on it at the time, like, God damn, son. He was like historically low. It was terrible. And then the most recent poll I saw, he's at 40. So he did move up a little bit. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if he moves up even a little bit more, given a bunch of the things that have happened recently. And so we can talk about that in just a second here. Democrats managed to remain ahead of Republicans until November, when the GOP took over the lead in 538's average of generic congressional ballot polls. But as of this week, after tying Republicans the previous week, Democrats have taken a slim lead over the GOP at 43.8% to 43.5% as of this weekend. So just so everybody understands, this is without a doubt a statistical tie. I mean, this is within the margin of error. So effectively, they're tied. But again, the reason why it's a story is because this is now the average of the polls. It's not just an outlier. It's like, they are actually tied. Okay, Republicans still hold a narrow 0.1% lead in the Real Clear Politics average, which is weighted differently than the 538's average. Democrats also last led in the RCP average in early November 2021. There are a number of factors at play that could be responsible for the apparent surge in Democratic fortunes. So we should talk about those things. Why is it now all of a sudden Democrats are basically surging? I mean, honestly, the answers are pretty straightforward. So number one, Roe versus Wade. Republicans overturned it. The Supreme Court overturned it. Republicans celebrated it. That is simply not popular. It's just not popular. People support Roe v. Wade in a plethora of polls from before it happened and after it happened. People support Roe versus Wade. They just do. So that's one thing that's super important. The January 6th committee is hammering Trump relentlessly, and it's definitely political theater, but it's also definitely having an impact. Because when you learn all the details and the specifics, people realize, oh my God, this guy's a psycho. And that is now linked at the hip to the rest of the elected Republicans in the country. So that's another thing right there. The other thing is, it was a big story when in Clarence Thomas's decision in Roe versus Wade, he said in no uncertain terms, well, next we need to look at gay marriage. There was a lot of talk about that. And then you had a vote in the House, and 157 Republicans voted against gay marriage. Also, 195 Republicans voted against a right to contraception. They want states to be allowed to ban gay marriage and contraception. That is incredibly authoritarian, and that is wildly out of lockstep with your average American. So, look, those are some of the big things, but then you can't deny it. There's been a bunch of legislative movement in Biden and the Democrats' direction. So we had the PACT Act. The PACT Act gave health care to veterans who are victims of toxic burn pits. That was, it was the Democrats who voted for it. A bunch of Republicans blocked it the first time. Then Jon Stewart went on a crusade and shamed them to the high heavens. And then eventually we were able to chip away enough Republicans to get it passed. But you still have most Republicans who are still against it. So, and just the fact they voted it down the first time anyway is psycho stuff. people were paying attention to that. So that's a big deal. The other thing, the CHIPS Act. Now, the CHIPS Act does have problems with it. There are aspects of it that I think it's fair to just call corporate welfare. But at the same time, the heart of the bill is, let's bring back microchip manufacturing to this country. Why? Because we had outsourced a lot of it. In fact, most of it is in Taiwan now. That's a very unstable situation given how China's being bellicose and beating their chests and acting like they might invade any day now. And also what happened with COVID, the pandemic made it so that people realize, well, hold on, maybe there's like a national security reason to not outsource all of our jobs all the time. And so bringing back microchip manufacturing is massively popular. So that's another thing that went in the direction of the Democrats. The other thing is the Inflation Reduction Act just passed. So the last time we talked about it on the show, it had passed the Senate. And we were speculating like, look, man, I don't know. I think it'll pass the House, but there's a chance it won't pass the House because you got Gottheimer and you got what's called the Unbreakable Nine. If 3 of the Unbreakable Nine decide, no, we're going to tank this because we have friends on Wall Street and in hedge funds, well, then they could tank it. Well, it turns out what Kyrsten Sinema negotiated in the bill, which we're going to cover later, by the way, how insanely corrupt it was and how it's just a giveaway to private equity. But the fact that she was able to knock out one of those provisions basically bought the support of the so-called Unbreakable Nine, and it ended up passing the House, man. It ended up passing the House. So, the Inflation Reduction Act and all the other things put together, that's a big deal. And so you're going to see Democrats' numbers go up more, and you're going to see Biden's numbers go up more. So just to give you some more specifics, here's the Inflation Reduction Act summary. Clean electricity tax credits, $161 billion for that. Air pollution, hazardous materials, transportation, and infrastructure, $40 billion for that. Individual clean energy initiatives, $37 billion for that. Clean manufacturing tax credits, $37 billion for that. Clean fuel and vehicle tax credits, $36 billion for that. Conservation, rural development, and forestry, $35 billion for that. Building efficiency, electrification, transmission, industrial, DOE grants, and loans, $27 billion for that. Other energy and climate spending, $14 billion for that. Under healthcare, we have $64 billion towards an extension of expanded Obamacare subsidies. So this is money that's going towards healthcare, desperately needed. Now, again, nowhere near enough. We need Medicare for all. At the very least, we need a public option. But they're throwing $64 billion to extend subsidies, which is going to help a significant chunk of people in the country, which matters in terms of your polls and in terms of getting voters. And then also, of course, there's some drugs now that we're going to negotiate for lower drug prices. Now, this, of course, they did the Weasley Washington thing, which is like, let's exclude most drugs and let's negotiate for only certain ones, and let's let the negotiation kick in like a few years in the future. There's all these stipulations and whatnot, but there's some negotiation for some drug prices, and that's that's at least a step in the right direction. And then, of course, I think honestly the best provisions in this, apart from some of the clean energy stuff, like I think you get, I don't remember the exact number, but you get a massive tax credit if you buy an electric vehicle and things of that nature. That's going to matter. But 15% corporate minimum tax, that's a huge deal. Because we have a lot of corporations that pay no income tax, no corporate income tax whatsoever. We have a lot of corporations that have a negative income tax, which is a net subsidy to them. So they are the welfare queens. So a 15% corporate minimum tax is a huge deal, and that's going to raise $313 billion. Then, of course, the thing that people on the right are freaking out about is the funding of, I think it's over 60,000 new IRS agents, and the right is pretending like, oh my God, they're going to go after small businesses and middle-class people. When in the bill, it says that they only target people who make over $400,000 a year. Nobody who makes under $400,000 a year is going to be subject to increased enforcement from the IRS. And remember, the IRS has been absolutely shellacked under Donald Trump and the Republicans because they don't want the IRS to go after corporations and to go after billionaires and to go after the wealthy. And so Biden's basically beefing up the IRS a little bit to go after the wealthy. And so that's a very important thing as well. Then you have the closure of the carried interest loophole. I think that was amended in the final passage of the bill. But what we did get is, I believe, a 1% tax on stock buybacks, which, look, stock buybacks should be banned. They were made legal in 1982 by Ronald Reagan, and they're basically a giant scam. But insofar as they're going to exist, you should at least fucking tax the shit out of them for it. And the 1% tax on, I mean, that's not a hefty tax, but it is going to raise billions of dollars, and now that's in this bill. So look, this bill overall is massively weak, especially because we were originally talking about Build Back Better. So we were talking about, child care, 2 years of free college. We were talking about elder care, an extended child tax credit. There were a lot of things in the original Build Back Better bill, which were phenomenal. And virtually all of it was, they took a hatchet to it. Manchin and Sinema did, and Biden, of course, cucked himself to them. But in today's dysfunctional Washington, just the fact that anything was passed, that's going to be viewed as a win for the Democrats, and you're going to see a bump. You've already seen a bump in Democrats' numbers, and I think they might go up even a little bit more. Because again, despite all the problems with this bill, a 15% corporate minimum tax is a gigantic deal. Like that's probably the best part of the bill, as well as some of the, like tax credits for buying electric vehicles and some of the infrastructure spending over here. And I believe it's supposed to be a 40% reduction of carbon emissions by, I forget the exact year. Was it 2030, 2040, something like that? Anyway, so look, add all these things up, big political wins for Democrats, and those polls are going to shift. And with the Republicans marching further and further to the right and, still at this late date defending Trump despite his obvious criminalities, well, there are consequences to doing stuff like that, and you're witnessing it unfold. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.